This is perhaps the best watch I've ever bought, and I'm telling you this after I've already got a Grand Seiko Spring Drive. So that should tell you something. Because not only does this watch have a fantastic fit and finish, but it also excels at being a watch. You know, at actually telling time, what a watch is supposed to do. And this watch does it more so than any other watch I've previously bought. And yes, I know it's quartz, and I know it's crazy expensive for quartz. But it's one of those watches that you get and really makes you think and question what you really want in another watch. It's that good. This is the Citizen AQ4091-56E, part of Citizen's new higher-end lineup known as the Citizen. Yes, they really called it that. And down here at the bottom, this Phoenix logo thing here, or whatever it is, that's part of the whole the Citizen thing. And you can also consider it to be part of Citizen's Chronomaster line, if that's even a thing. I think maybe the Citizen replaced that, but it uses the same movement as those older Chronomasters, which is the same high accuracy solar quartz movement. And because it's sort of both, I've also heard this one referred to as the Chicken Chronomaster. But whatever you want to call it, this thing's amazing, and I'm going to show you that here. First up, let's get the information overload done so you have an idea what I'm talking about. So it's spec time. And this one is a 40mm titanium watch with a 47mm lug-to-lug. I know right now the trend is to go smaller and smaller, but for my wrist, which is about a 7¼ this thing's perfect. Not too big, not too small, and a short enough lug-to-lug for my wrist. So for me, in terms of size, this is a Goldilocks watch. Now, total thickness is 12.4mm, which may be a tad tall for what it is. But that does include a closed case back and one heck of a double-dome sapphire crystal. It's got some height, and this thing is remarkably clear, like it's not there clear. Now, there's no screwed down crown here, but you still have 100 meters of water resistance, as well as a standard 20mm lug width, and it's incredibly lightweight at 70 grams, give or take a link or two on its bracelet, which in large part is thanks to the titanium case, or as Citizen likes to call it, super titanium, because it also includes their proprietary scratch-resistant coating, which if you've noticed the polish is a very nice addition. And the icing on the cake is that it's powered by Citizen's A060 movement, which is a solar-powered high-accuracy quartz movement, one that should be accurate to about plus or minus 5 seconds a year. A year, and just think about that for a second, plus or minus 5 seconds a year, because most of the other high-accuracy quartz watches I've seen have been 10, and then regular quartz watches are about 15 to 20 seconds a month. And when you're talking about autos, you're talking about per day, not even per month or year. So plus or minus 5 is amazing. Now, I'm not going to get into it, but there's a lot of cool, interesting techniques and technology that goes into making something this accurate. And on top of everything, this just isn't accurate, but it also has a perpetual calendar and a jumping hour. So if you want a true set it and forget it watch, this is about as good as you can get. Now, as for price, this one is a bit expensive, but it's kind of supposed to be. It's one of Citizen's new top-end watches, and therefore it's priced accordingly with an MSRP of $2,400. However, before some of you freak out, remember that's MSRP. If you're patient, you hunt around a little bit, you can find it for less. And even more so if you get one used, which is how I got this one. But a little bit more on price and value in a bit. With that out of the way, we might as well just start by talking about what I love about this one, which is almost everything. There's only a few things here I'd actually change. And first off, let's talk about this beautiful, simple, yet elegant design. With its mostly brushed exterior, it's definitely more of a sports watch. With just a touch of flash from the polished chamfers, highlights on the bracelets, and the clean bezel, helping to highlight the sleek design and guide your eyes to where it matters. And remember here, this is a titanium case, and I'm going to say this a few times. But here, you can tell that it's titanium a little bit from the brushed bits. Yet, you don't typically see this level of polish on a titanium watch, and that alone I think is impressive. On the rear, there's a simple case back complete with the Chronomaster chicken, while over at the right, the crown here is fairly small, protected by these narrow crown guards. Yet, given the nature of the watch, you're not actually going to be using that crown much. And in the 4 or 5 months since I originally bought this one, I don't even think I've touched the crown after setting it. There's also this recessed button right above the crown, and that's there to help check the battery level as well as when you're setting the perpetual calendar. Now, zooming in here, you might have noticed that there's something a little bit different about the dial. It's sort of this matte dark charcoal color black, with some subtle texture to it. And that's because this particular version is using a washi paper dial. Or at least I think I'm pronouncing that right, but it's a traditional type of paper from Japan. So here it's used and it's kind of sandwiched in between a solar cell that's underneath it and some sort of clear base, which is what the indices, the framing, and the logo are applied to. I'm not entirely sure what it's made of, but it does have this slight sunburst effect over that dark matte paper backdrop. And whatever it is, it's one of the few things that I kind of find odd about this one. It's not necessarily something I'd replace, but it is a little different. Because when you're looking straight down at it, you see this deep, dark, light-absorbing black. Yet when you start moving it a little bit, you get that sunburst, and then every once in a while you get a bit of glare where you don't think there should be glare. Now, it's not enough to distract you while you're trying to read it, but it's just a little bit odd because you don't expect it when you're looking at a paper dial. And if I really wanted to be nitpicky here, I would prefer it if the date was down at the 6. As well as maybe pick either the Citizen or the chicken logo. They don't necessarily need both. But I do appreciate that Citizen kept this one rather clean and symmetrical as it is. They didn't go crazy and throw a giant wall of text on it, unlike some other brands. With this one, you could tell they really didn't want to distract from just the quality here, from the beautiful dial and the indices. And the end results speak for themselves. It's fantastic. In a lot of ways, this design reminds me a lot of the legendary SARB 033, which is kind of weird to call it legendary because when I started the channel, they were everywhere. And now, those that still have them won't ever give them up. But I think this shares a similar design philosophy, where it's a clean, crisp, subtle, yet refined design. One that's very usable and very versatile. I personally never had a SARB 033. By the time I was kind of interested, they had already been discontinued. But the thing is, after getting this, and after wearing this for a week, I started understanding why people love them and obsessed over them. And while those that still have them will never give them up. It's just that with this one, you can kind of think of it as a higher-end titanium, high-accuracy solar SARB 033, made by Citizen with the chicken on the dial. Now, over the last few months, I know I've said go anywhere, do anything kind of watch a lot. I know I have, so I'm trying to use it sparingly here. But ultimately, that's really what this design is. A watch that can pretty much do it all with a sense of subtle sophistication. A true one-watch collection type watch is another way to put it. And I should point out here that there are a number of different colorways. Some with different colors of that washi paper dial, and some that are more standard, as well as some that are even more exotic. And initially, I was really thinking about the blue version, but I found this good deal on the black one, and in the end, I'm really glad I got this one. Because with the black paper dial, it adds this really unique, interesting character to the watch. One where the non-reflective, dark kind of charcoal background really lets the polish on the indices in the hands shine. It's dark, it's black, it just absorbs the light, where the indices reflect it beautifully. And speaking of shine, let's talk about the fit and finish. And once again, remember this is a titanium watch. And I'm saying that once more because if you didn't know it, you might think it's steel thanks to the polish. Now, for the most part, I'm going to let the montage of macro shots here do most of the talking. And especially the dial shots, I just love those. But the short version of all this is that from what I've seen, the quality here, the fit and the finish, is worthy of a watch in this price range. Now it's not quite Grand Seiko, yet at the same time it also seems to be better than my Oceanus, which I think is fitting because price-wise it fits in between the two. So if you're looking at a really good quartz watch, this is a pretty good compromise. So on the off chance you were kind of thinking of a really good quartz watch and you were debating between Oceanus and Grand Seiko, I know, probably doesn't happen often. But if you're in that rare instance, this is a good compromise between the two. And if you're someone who's never seen a good quartz watch, or you have the perception that all quartz is cheap, then I think this thing would blow your mind if you saw it. And lastly, I'm just going to say it here that with this level of polish, I'm also pretty glad there's a scratch resistant coating. Another great thing about it is just how comfortable it is on the wrist, which you might expect because remember, this thing weighs only about 70 grams, and it's on its bracelet, which is like nothing. And on my 7¼ inch wrist, the lug-to-lug here is perfect to match the curvature. So take that, pair it with an aggressive taper and a really thin milled clasp, and you have a great comfortable experience. It is a little bit tall, but most of that is because of the crystal, and there's still a pretty low center of gravity. So that's not an issue. But it would be nice here if the end links were female, or if the links themselves were fully articulating. But for my wrist it works, and the links are still fairly short, and you can't really argue with the end result, so I can only complain so much. If anything, my only true gripe here is that there's a lack of any micro adjusts. Yes, there are half links with the bracelet, so that's something, but half links don't always cut it. And I would really love it if Citizen could incorporate an on-the-fly adjustable clasp with this one. If you've seen my Oceanus, it actually has a pretty similar clasp, but it's one that has an on-the-fly adjustment, where when you push down the buttons to open it, it can extend out just a little bit. Not a lot, but enough to help out on a hot and humid day. Now, of course, we also can't forget to talk about LUME. Seiko is usually considered the king of Japanese LUME, but I've actually seen plenty of Citizens that are just as good, if not better. And while this one here isn't exactly a king of LUME, it's still pretty good and great for a sports watch. And I appreciate that they actually use two different types of LUME, with green for the indices and blue for the hands, making it just a little bit more interesting when it first lights up. Now with this one and its narrow indices and narrower hands, it's not exactly blinding when you first see it. But I gotta say that each component on the dial is bright with laser sharp clarity. And they're all able to go to the distance, mostly keeping up with a Seiko diver, which again is great for a sports watch. And the last thing that I want to lovingly fawn over is just how intelligently designed the movement is, to create a near perfect watch, because remember, the true purpose of a watch is to tell time. It's a tool, it's not just a piece of jewelry you wear on your wrist. So first off, this one is a high accuracy quartz movement, and a pretty impressive one at that. Most of the high accuracy quartz watches I've seen out there, and this includes the Grand Seiko 9F movements, those are all set to be within plus or minus 10 seconds a year. But here Citizen beats that with a plus or minus 5 seconds a year accuracy. And from what I've seen over the last few months, that seems to be true, as I think I've only lost about a second in that time. And on top of all of that, it's solar. Perhaps the only solar high accuracy quartz I've seen. And I think this leads it to having a distinct advantage over those considering a 9F Grand Seiko, because with those, the battery only lasts about 3 years. Whereas with this, I'm not even going to be thinking about a battery or even any type of servicing for at least 10, 15, maybe 20 years. Then the next thing to talk about is the perpetual calendar, which does make this a little bit harder to initially set up, but once it is, you'll never need to reset the date, helping to make it a true set it and forget it powerhouse. Now, I can already see some comments down below saying, hold on, wait a minute, that's not exactly true. What about when you're traveling, or what about daylight savings time? Because with the other high accuracy quartz watches I've seen, that's been kind of the weak point or the sore spot with them. And especially so with the Bulova Precisionist line. Because no matter how accurate those watches are, when you change time zones or enter the dreaded daylight savings, you're going to have to pull out the crown, and when you do it, it stops the watch, kind of making the whole plus or minus per year thing moot. But here, that's where this one has really impressed me, as it utilizes a jumping hour movement, kind of like a true GMT, just without the whole GMT hand. And to be fair here, I think the Grand Seiko 9F movements do this too. So here, just like with the true GMT, you pull the crown out to the first position. And there you can adjust the hour-handed 1 hour increments without fully resetting the watch. So in those two specific occasions, you do have to touch the crown to adjust the watch a bit. But with the jumping hour, it's quick, it's easy, and you're doing it while that second hand keeps on ticking. Which finally brings us to the value argument, or value conversation, because this one is a little bit tricky to talk about, as it really depends on your perspective. So on one hand, if you're already interested in a high-end or luxury quartz watch, and say you're interested in something like a quartz Grand Seiko, at that point there is a big value proposition here, because this is a very attractive and less expensive alternative. With a fit and finish that's fantastic. It's not quite Grand Seiko level, but it's also a third the price. And in some ways, this actually has an edge over Grand Seiko with perpetual calendar and solar. However, at the same time, if you're really looking at this just because you like the idea of a high actually quartz movement, then I kind of got some bad news for you. Because you also have to understand that as amazing as they are from an engineering standpoint, there are a couple of other much cheaper technologies out there that kind of make the entire concept obsolete for most people, at least from a practical standpoint. And that of course is multi-band, Bluetooth, and GPS, which are being integrated into some much cheaper watches out there. And with those, they're able to externally sync on at least a daily basis. So if always being accurate is your thing, there are some cheaper, smarter, if not less elegant solutions out there. And that's kind of the whole value concept here in a nutshell. Now, as long as I'm here, I kind of want to address some of the anti-quartz comments that I'm sure are already in the comments. And if you're someone who's not truly anti-quartz, but just really prefers automatics, to the point that, if you're going to spend this amount of money, you're obviously going to get an automatic. And if that's you, I totally understand. I've been there myself. It's just that for me, I already own a lot of good automatics. And at some point in my watch collecting journey, I just started thinking about what else is out there, which is what led me to get some nicer quartz watches. And what I've come to appreciate about a watch like this, or my Oceanus, is that their quality is just as good, if not better, than any of my automatics. It's just that I don't have to constantly fool with them. They're just there, ready when I am. So sometimes I do want to play with my watches before heading out, and other times I don't, and sometimes I just don't have time to fiddle. And it's those times where I've really come to appreciate watches like these, and ultimately just like having an option. But back to the whole anti-quartz crowd, and I'm talking specifically about the whole no quartz watch should cost more than $20 comments. If that's you, I'm just gonna say it, you're wrong and get your head out of your ass. Now, if you don't like quartz, that's fine, that's one thing. But assuming that they're all cheap crap and getting enraged when you see one that's not is asinine. Just like with automatics, there are different levels of quality and grades of quartz. Yes, there are some cheap-ass Chinese-made quartz movements out there, but there are also cheap-ass Chinese-made unreliable automatic movements out there as well. And the whole idea that quartz has to be cheap makes no sense whatsoever. If you look into it, a decent, reliable quartz Seiko movement costs about as much as an NH35. Maybe $10 cheaper, if that. And if you can accept a $400 to $500 watch with an NH35, why the hell would you think a quartz version built to the same level would be a fraction of that? There's no logic to that. Okay, so maybe that wasn't a quick word, but the bottom line here is that this watch is amazing, and I truly love it. I initially bought it just because I was curious and found a great deal on it. But in less than a week, it completely won me over, and I knew I was never going to get rid of it. Yes, it is pricey, but it's also a watch that I think can go toe-to-toe with most other watches in that price range. And I think it's one you'll love and keep for a long time. It's an elegant, subtle, yet sophisticated design, expertly crafted with an amazing fit and finish, and all powered by a movement that turns it into a true set-it-and-forget-it powerhouse. It's a watch that's ideal for practically any situation, including traveling. It's not a GMT, but it's not a GMT, if you get what I mean. Where that jumping hour hand makes it just as easy to adjust. So if you're interested in one of these, I highly recommend them, and especially if you see a good deal on one. Don't pass it up. Anyway, as usual, let me know your thoughts down below on the Chrono Chicken, on a Grand Seiko, or on anything. And as always, I'm Shane, this is Ralt of Time, and I'll see you next time.